that Gordon Lightfoot passed away on May the 1st at the age of 84. He was a Canadian singer-songwriter of Scottish descent, and Alan used that little bit of a clip at the beginning of this blurb, which is from November 30, 2006. And it is entitled Culture Creation, Familiarity, and Cogs Who Like the Wheel. Cutting out just a little bit, a couple of the songs that he used, one in the middle and one at the end. And the funny thing is that this was late November. There was an ice storm. He was talking about geoengineering. He picked a song to begin with that was about rain, and he picked a song to end with that was about rain. And as I am recording this, there is a thunder and lightning and rainstorm going on. So if you hear cracks in the distance, that's what that is. The bit I cut out, Alan was talking about geoengineering. He talked about that quite a bit, and he said if the media remains totally silent on this, that you can see overhead every day, how can you expect them to tell you the truth about anything? He also talked a little bit about how it was draining. I don't think he meant this in any kind of a mean-spirited way, but he said it was draining sometimes to talk one-on-one with people who were just waking up, because he said it's like coming back from outer space to explain a speck of dust. And he didn't mean, each individual one-on-one, but to go through this repetitively. What he was saying was that he spent a lot of time on the phone, sometimes morning until night, and he didn't even have time to eat. And he said, why kill myself to do this? And he was talking about the miracle is when an individual can break through their programming. And one has to ask themselves, why? Why them and not somebody else? And he said that answer is for the individual questioner, but his own thoughts on that were very interesting. And I thought, why me? And why still do I do what I'm doing? And of course I do it because I think that Alan's work was life-changing for me, and I always want that to be available for other people. But it's also because, for me, Alan's talks were about freedom, about being free to see things from my own unique perspective. And I found that to be incredibly liberating. Alan makes the point that this journey of coming into consciousness, that maybe it is not for everyone. And he cautions against labeling yourself a conspiracy theorist. And it's funny because today someone sent me a short clip, which I think I'll put up. And they said, Alan talked about Nick Begich and mind control and devices to control the mind. There was a newscaster somewhere in the west coast of the U.S., and I think the year was 2000 that the piece was on the air. And they were interviewing different people who were saying that they had been targeted for this kind of electronic warfare. And I know that part of the story, part of the visual that I was seeing, was planned that way by the news producers, that they would show you people who were actually wearing tinfoil hats. But Alan's point that he was making in this talk is, why is it when you wake up to this information why is it so important for you that you make everyone else see things the way that you see them? And there's that rush of going out and telling people, you know why this is happening, and you know why that is happening, and you know who's doing this, and it completely overwhelms them, and they think you're mad. And he said, really, the journey is your own life, your own experiences. And he said a lot of people can't get there because they are unable to analyze their own behavior, their own responses and reactions to what they see. And this is even people who have, say, broken through to level 1. I've seen this myself with my own eyes. Listeners, longtime listeners to Alan's talks, who still need it to be a group thing. They need to go into Walmart and yell at someone, yell at them about their masking policy. But they never ask themselves why they think it's okay to terrorize a cashier. He said, people will rationalize and justify everything they do because of their ego. It's always someone else's fault. And he said that the system depends on that. It depends on that reaction from people. In other words, the elite, these evil people who plan and implement this down through the generations, they count on all the way down the line. It's not just the compliance, but it's the human nature thing that seems to be a part of human nature that just wants to point and say, it's them, they're doing this. And Alan said, everything, it's every kind of behavior, every possible human behavior, each of us are capable of doing. That is the microcosm. And until you can see that in yourself and recognize that in yourself, you are at level 1. And it doesn't matter how much you can spout about the Royal Institute of International Affairs or Bernays or Carl Quigley, it doesn't matter. Getting beyond that is the part where you look at yourself and you look at your own attitudes and your own behavior and your own complicity. I find that very freeing. And it's not pleasant to see my part and my choices, my attitudes through life, but it is liberating to see that, to recognize it, and then move beyond that. Oh, the places you will go in your mind. One of the things that Alan talked about in this talk was the symbolism that is all around you. He said the temptation is to point at whoever the politician is. He said it doesn't matter. Their names don't matter. Their titles don't matter. The positions don't matter. They're all completely interchangeable, one with the other. He said, look and see the symbolism all around you, your parliament buildings, all of your government buildings, the architecture, the artwork. This was created because he said, culture, creation, what does that mean? To culture something is to grow it. So your culture is always being grown for you, and this is true down through time. So when you first start to see things, you are in that level 1, you might not notice the symbolism, the gargoyles, the black and white checkered floor, the obelisk. And when he was talking about the spire of a church, he said the spire of a church is really just an obelisk. And he was talking about the generative principle, the creative principle, male, female. He said it's all around you, everywhere you look. That is what the checkerboard is, the yin, the yang, the male, the female. And the obelisk, he said you'll often see that in front of, say, a reflecting pool. The reflecting pool is the female, the obelisk, the male. And when he was talking about that, my mind went to Notre Dame Cathedral and the terrible fire that happened on April the 15th of 2019. And Alan talked about that after it happened. He would never say, oh, they did that. He wouldn't venture out on a speculative limb like that. but it's highly symbolic. A spire was burned, most of the roof of probably the most iconic Christian piece of architecture in the world. This was burned, and think of the timing, 2019. We're at a turning point, the beginning of the kickoff of the next thing. I looked into that a little bit today when that crossed my mind, and I saw a piece that was written, the progress of construction 4 years later. And the article said, they still don't know what caused the fire. Was it a cigarette? Or was it an electrical fire? And I thought, I'm not a firewoman, but there must be clues. I did just a little bit of digging, and I learned that there are at least 5 types of extinguishers that are used. So when firemen get to the scene of a fire, they have to assess what they're looking at before they choose what kind of flame retardant they're going to use on the fire. When that fire happened, there was an extensive remodel going on. So many of the priceless artifacts had been removed for that, which is also another interesting thing to consider. And I'm sure that the workmen, since they had all of that exposed woodwork and beams, and it's an ancient structure, would have certainly been cautioned against smoking on the job. But there you go, 4 years later, and they don't know what caused the fire. But what does that spire represent that was burned down? That something like an obelisk, that male phallus symbol. And I was just thinking that it is interesting, the timing now, and Notre Dame, Our Lady. And what have we seen under incredible attack for the last several years is Christianity and the woman. I read today there was a sporting event that was for women competing, and some of the women refused to go to the podium when the award was given because the person who won the event, was transgender. And so in protest, they just refused to go up to the podium. There are women who are saying this is an attack on us. Is it enough? And I didn't really want to talk about that today. I just wanted to talk about symbolism. It is all around us, and it is interesting, and it only needs to make sense to you. What do you see? And what does it mean to you? Based on your other observations, your experience, your journey through your life. I was looking at one of the little Substacks that I subscribe to today. This is a person who is often criticizing people within the alternate media. So sometimes reading the Substack can be informative, but sometimes it's just a little bit too much mudslinging and criticism, and it's not interesting because I don't follow things at that level. It's, we only have one life and so much time in a day, and I don't need to know all of that. But he made a point, to my point. He was criticizing one of the alternate players, and he said, there just came a time when I realized that if a person was not aggressively trying to solve this mystery, all of it, then I just had to let them go. I had to discard them as controlled opposition, etc. And I thought, well, if Alan was still here and weighing in on things week in and week out, he would probably be dissecting his talks in that way and saying, oh, no, he's not aggressively trying to solve this mystery. But to me, that was the beauty of Alan, because Alan always rose above, saw the big picture, and as he said in this talk regarding politicians, it doesn't matter. Their names don't matter. And he would be saying the same thing about all the little players and hangers-on of this event that we are going through right now, that we have been through. He would say, does it really matter? because what you're seeing is your culture changing. This is inevitable. It's always changing. We're always living through great change, but when we begin the journey into being consciously aware of what's going on, it's all of a sudden things are really changing and it's upside down world. But no, it's always that way at any given time in history. And what Alan was saying about the media and the alternate media is that's the beauty of indoctrination. You're going to get the same thing whether you hear it from the mainstream or the alternate, because the alternate is always in dialectic position with the main. And if you can't see outside that, you're always whiplashed back and forth, back and forth. So I leave you with this short little bit from me. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in, and I mostly wanted to say it's that freedom that I love in Ellen's talks, that it's very liberating, and I do have to remind myself all the time not to get caught up in the little things, the little players, because yes, I can see this substacker's point. What we have lived through is horrific, but Alan made a point which he's made many times before. History is a horror show. I think the better use of my time for me is to stay with my own observations and examine my own attitudes from time to time. Have a reality check with myself. So the next thing coming up is a little talk with Bruce and Johnny from Dynamic Independence on Wednesday, and the next installment of the Programmed People excerpt series. And Wednesday's edition is Psychic Driving. So thank you all as always, and have a good week.
Hello, this is Alan Watt, and it is November the 30th, 2006. I'd like to talk a little bit about conspiracy theory. Now, the term conspiracy theory was given to the public to use, and those who are trying to expose things have adopted this without thinking. It's quite interesting how psychology works and how it's known to work, because I've always stated that if you have the facts, especially the facts that are written about by some of the main players in this grand scheme of things, not about them, but by them, then you have the facts, and you use the facts. That's not a conspiracy. Now, H.G. Wells said the same thing back in the 1920s. He says this is an open conspiracy. Even then, they published many, many books about their goals, their future, the world planning, the organization that would go into it, the kind of future they were going to bring in. And it's never changed. That's ongoing. And there are many books published by in-crowd type professors, books which are not promoted by the media. They're out there, though, for the public if they want to go through them. Most of them won't, because the public are trained like everything else in their tastes. Their tastes are not their tastes. They're given to them, whether it's entertainment or book reading, whatever. And if the media doesn't tell you that this is a must-see book, then they won't read it. It's only the oddball here and there, like me, who goes through the dry, dusty books, which are definitely boring, until you come across gold, an occasional paragraph here and there. But legally, the information has been put out. For those who accept the term conspiracy theorist, they're adapting a term which is discrediting them right off the bat. So I hope people stop using conspiracy theory, the term that the other side would like you to use about yourselves. I get many, many phone calls, and I often have to, nowadays, unhook the phone. Because at one time, I did literally take calls non-stop from 7 in the morning till midnight, 1 in the morning. And I wouldn't even have time to eat. And I've stopped that because why kill myself? And it is true that a lot of people will suck you dry. And that's really what a lot of people are there for, is to suck you dry. Others are genuine enough. But I can't keep going over the process of waking up to everybody who's starting to wake up, because it's too draining on a one-to-one basis. And for me, it's like coming back from outer space to see a molecule of dust somewhere, something that I'd seen long ago. It's low-level stuff. The popular conspiracy media don't help this process, because the process works by giving out certain information. If we take the regular media, their job is to give you your thoughts for each day, to stop you thinking for yourself. They give you the topics, they'll give you the answers, or a pretended debate about the outcome. You're guided to a conclusion, which is not yours, but you'll accept it, not realizing it's not yours, because you're only given limited information on any topic. And when you try and avoid that kind of media, people tend to look for truth elsewhere. And elsewhere used to be alternative AM or shortwave radio. It's now combined with internet today. And sure enough, there's lots of them out there. And all they're doing is when you're trying to skip your downloading from the regular media, they're going over what's in the regular media in the alternative media. Now, the process of indoctrination, it doesn't matter who gives you the information to be indoctrinated with, or your thoughts for the day, as long as you get them. That's the important part. So I tend not to look into shows that go through what politician has been put forth to bring out whatever bill, because it's irrelevant. These names are really irrelevant. These people are irrelevant. If it wasn't them, it would be another look-alike that would be put in their place to do the same thing. They just happen to be the high masons that are in at the moment, and they're given their marching orders, and they do it. I liken this kind of mentality of the day-by-day blows, what's being done to you, as the laboratory. It's like mice in a cage. And every day, at the crack of dawn, they start chattering about, well, what do you think they'll do to us today? And will they inject us? Will they take one of us out and dissect them? Will they put the wires in our brains and make us dance? There's a thousand possibilities, you see. And sure enough, at 8 o'clock, in comes the white-coated priest. And he starts on his business, and they're chatting, what's he doing now? What, is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? That's where alternate media has always been, at that stage. The chattering about the next blow that's going to be struck, or could be struck, and they take every possibility to the extreme, almost like a panic situation. And people do get panicked by that kind of stuff. The sky is always falling, every day it's falling. And I tell people that here's the important thing. When you realize that all you're doing by being terrified, and why you're terrified, it's because you're reacting to an older way of life, the one you were born into, changing. And really, everything that you thought about that older way of life is more like a Hollywood fiction than a reality. There were no good old days. And the system has always been here. All they're doing is changing their system to to make it more efficient for themselves into the next phase. And this has been going on for millennia. We follow history. History is a horror show. A horror show of money from the Middle East, ancient times, being introduced everywhere, and then standing armies following it, recruited by money, kept together by money, taxation, and armies going off to conquer and slaughter and dominate. All down through history, so that a few men behind the scenes, a few families really, could benefit from the vast wealth of slavery. Now, Charles Galton Darwin said in his book, The Next Million Years, quite matter-of-factly, he spoke the same way as Aldous Huxley spoke. And they knew each other very well. And Charles Galton Darwin said, there has always existed slavery in one form or another. We are simply creating a more sophisticated version of it. And that has been done, you see. We are trained now to be good producers-consumers, the terms used at the UN to describe the perfect world citizen. You have value to the system as long as you're producing within the system and consuming within the system. If you're one or the other, you're a bad citizen. You have to be both. That can tell you that as soon as you retire, you're now a consumer. And you're on the bad books. We can tell where it's going to end up with the elderly eventually. It'll be very much like Logan's Run, the book and movie, where people will grow to a certain age and then go off to be into some sort of tank, and you'll go up and smoke, and that's you off to nirvana. The next step, supposedly. That could be done. That could be introduced. Anything, you see, in society, any culture, any belief system can be taught, especially when any of it has been done in previous times. Plato said that himself. Now, there's no species on this planet, no species. You've all watched the wildlife species. You're overrun with wildlife species programs and Audubon wildlife and all this stuff from insects, sexual nature to whatever. Incessant stuff, not there by accident. And you see all these scientists observing and filming and big money going into this. Well, you see, that's nothing, because man has been the most studied creature on this planet, even thousands and thousands of years ago. Nothing has been studied more than the nature of man, of woman, of children, male, female, down through the milestones as they go from childhood to adolescence, teenager, and so on. This is how perfectly we're understood. And the ancient Greeks said this in their own writings. Then, that anything which has been made to happen in the past within culture or was taught as a belief system can be reintroduced, because all these things are formulas. If you know the formula, the sequence of introduction of a topic, a thing, whatever, you can replay it again and it will work exactly the same way if it's introduced the same way and followed up the same way. We can see this from the whole New Age movement, planned long ago, written about extensively in the 1800s, and gradually introduced, backed by big money, getting towards the earth worship until we are just a species on the planet along with the insects and the worms, and now we have no more rights in the worms, and that's a biodiversity treaty that was signed. So anything can be done to humanity. Culture itself culture is to grow. To grow, you culture something. When they do it in the laboratories for bacterium, they put it in a little petri dish, and it grows, and they call that a culture. You culture it. So culture is grown. Now that means there's a gardener somewhere who grows it. That's the big boys. They give you your culture. We emulate what's given to us without thinking. And culture is plastic. It can be bent, shaped, directed into anything that they wish. Anything at all. But it's much easier to reintroduce something that's been done before, because then it's guaranteed to work. I've talked to many elderly people who've watched and followed the machinations of this agenda for most of their lives. And they often were ardent listeners to, at that time it was a shortwave radio, which gave out the alternative news, but it also gave it all the spins and the Christianity side of things. It will overcome, don't worry, God's in control, after it had just terrified you for an hour or so. And again, selling its fear-based products. And what they've all told me is that they've wasted so much time watching senators, congressmen, politicians in different countries introduce bills. They've heard the moves to write. At first it was writing to your congressman, then it was phone their offices, bombard them with phone calls, then it was fax. Everybody faxed them, and now it's emailing them. And what they've all told me is that nothing they have ever done, and all that they've watched and participated in, has made no dent whatsoever. The agenda is the agenda. People who are freaking out every day have not really woken up, or else have fallen into the trap that their country has been taken over by the day, when it really wasn't theirs to begin with. They haven't realized that. It's hard to let go the founding myths that people are given, because they want so much to believe that the heroes they have been given were genuine. And yet every country has its founding mythologies. They've always given founding mythos for building nations, which they've always controlled. And to be kept in a constant state, a daily state of terror, is not good for anybody's health, and it's not productive. It's not productive. You cannot use this system or beat this system by using the system. The complaints do not work. We've watched that in our own lifetimes. We've watched the European Union come to pass. We watched the people in different countries voting no. They didn't want it. They got it regardless, even when they voted no, the majority of them. And these are, again, must-be's. These are Masonic, high Masonic must-be's. You're going to get it whether you like it or not. That's the thing. As to what's happening today and what's going to happen, and everybody knows it's coming down, with a massive build-up of internal armies called Special Police Forces. They call them the Multi-Jurisdictional Task Force. There's a whole bunch of different fancy names they have, and they're interlinked with the military, and many of them in the police force actually go over to these warring countries for practice and then come back to their units at home.